Welcome to the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting for Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. The district posted this evening's agenda to board docs at least 24 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting. Is there a motion to approve that previously posted agenda? Ed?
Yes.
Can I get a second? Second. Thank you. Are there any amendments to offer?
There are none.
Okay. The agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please signify by saying I oppose. Those abstaining, please signify by saying I abstain. Motion carried. All right. The co-chairs are out. So Dr. Kelly, Mr. Marshallak, please begin with an overview of your agenda items for this evening.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight I have two agenda items on the agenda. The first item being the Keystone exam administration, which is an informational item. And then the second item is the 24-25 District 1-page calendar, which would require board action. So twice a year, the high school administration prepares to administer the Keystone exams. And preparation for the assessment begins as early as August, when districts are required to submit enrollment numbers for test takers. Preparation for this exam from our administration begins in August and then lasts all the way up until even today as we continue to look at numbers and get students ready. The high school is preparing to administer about 1,700 Keystone exams this testing window, which is about 1,200 unique test takers in the area of Algebra 1, biology, and literature. For tonight's presentation, I will review Act 158 and the graduation requirement, as well as the federal accountability of the why we give the exam. I will then move into the testing window and then give some general testing information for parents and guardians. So Act 158 was brought to us in 2018. And in 2018, this act, beginning with last year's graduating class, the class of 2023, stated that they must demonstrate proficiency in the area of Algebra 1, biology, and literature keystones. The act also allowed for alternative pathways towards graduation. So if the exam is not passed with a proficient rate, there are alternate pathways for students to score that they can meet those that graduation pathway. There are also other pathways that students can take, and all of that has been presented numerous times. The other piece to the Keystone exams for us each year is the accountability for grade 11, and this is the federal accountability that students are required to complete the Keystone exam by the end of their 11th grade year in those trigger courses, which again is Algebra 1, biology, and literature. This year, our testing window will begin when we return from break, which follows PDE testing window requirements, as well as our district calendar, which is approved the prior year but follows the PDE guidelines. So on Wednesday, January 3rd, 2 days after returning from break, we will begin testing our students that are in that trigger course of Algebra 1. They'll test for 2 days. Biology will follow a similar path and test on the 5th and the 8th, and then literature will test on the 9th and the 10th. During that time, and I'll review this on the next slide, there is a special testing schedule that students will have to follow. This communication has gone out from Mr. Alloway, or Dr. Alloway, excuse me, to show the different testing times that students would follow. So to prepare students and parents for the exam, this is what we have to remember. So the students taking the Keystone exam will report to school at 7:30. So the test does start at the beginning of the morning at 7:30 a.m. Students not taking a Keystone exam will report to school for Block 1, and Block 1 on those days reports at 11 a.m. So there is a delayed start so that we can administer a test to 1,200 students. It's a lot of test takers all at one time. Students taking the assessment will need to bring their district-issued Chromebooks, and Chromebooks must be charged. So we've been meeting since August about preparing our students as well as our staff and administration for what this will look like in the high school and what students would have to be ready to take. Also, the students are being prepared each day from the last 2 weeks on what the test looks like. So there are testing tutorials that students can walk through, issued by PDE, and those prepare the student for the tools that are built into the assessment. You may recall last year we piloted in 4th and 8th grade the science PSSA online, and the feedback that we received from the teachers, the principals, even students was, yes, we prefer this. It went very well. We also then met with the high school administration because we knew that the high school was going to be different, and they were ready to take on the challenge of administering the tests via the Chromebooks or technology. What this does is it does save some time on labeling 1,200 or 1,700 booklets by hand with little labels and getting them all prepared for the assessment. Just to remind parents and students that you must not have any cell phones, smartwatches, iPods. That's still how it's written in the testing guide. I know it sounds a little delayed, that language, but that's how they have it written. Those devices are, if they are with the student, they are collected. There's the protocols involved with the test administrator that those cell phones are brought in or given to the test administrator. They collect them at the beginning of the test, ask them to all be shut off, and then they're given back at the end of testing. That is a procedure that has been put in place by the administration at the high school. Also, if a child is found with a cell phone on their possession, then we do have to look into if the test was compromised at all. If it was, we do have to contact the state, and we go through the procedures working with the state throughout that process. If a parent wants to exempt their student from taking the exam, there is one way to do it. It's through a religious opt-out. And to have a religious opt-out, the parents and guardians must contact the building principal and set up a time to review the assessment. At that time, the principal will walk through how to schedule the time and then walk through the opt-out process by reviewing the assessment, again, with no technology on the parent, and then signing a confidentiality agreement. Those requests do go to the superintendent, who writes a letter of exemption, and then it's kept on file for us to have. So at this point, this is the end of the Keystone exam. Again, this is our annual presentation to make parents and students aware, as well as the board, on what is going on for this first administration of the Keystones. Are there any questions?
Does anybody have any questions about the Keystone exam? Thank you. Go on to the next topic.
The second item on the agenda is Dr. McGarry and I will be presenting the first draft of the one-page school calendar. This annual presentation is in accordance with District Policy 803. And before I review the agenda for this evening, I want to thank everyone who helped to develop the calendar, because it's a back and forth process with a lot of people. But I especially want to thank my administrative assistant, Jasmine Bennett, who goes back and forth with me starting in September when she's like, oh no, the calendar is coming up, right? And we go back and forth a bunch of different times to make sure that that everything is spelled out. She has become a pro at getting all the colors right and everything else. So I have a big thank you to Jasmine for all the work that she's done. Just to review the agenda for tonight, I'll review Pennsylvania Code and Act 80 and what is followed by, which we follow by developing the calendar. Religious observances discussion, Dr. McGarry will take that item. I'll then review the key dates on the calendar. For example, the first day of staff for students, professional development days, early dismissals, breaks that we have scheduled, the state assessment dates for the 24-25 school year, and then emergency closing information. So in developing the one-page calendar, we follow the Pennsylvania Department guidelines. We follow the basic education circular, the back on which days we must close schools. So just for starters, those dates include Saturdays, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Christmas, and Thanksgiving. So the school code tells us what days we cannot keep schools open. Act 80 and the instructional time also is spelled out that there are a number of days and hours, as well as activities that can count as instructional time and days that cannot count as instructional time. That is all spelled out in Act 80 as well. Just recently, that is changing a little bit, that you used to have the number of days, 180 days, and the number of hours, so 900 hours at an elementary level and 990 hours at a secondary level. That is now becoming an or. So it's a 180 or the 900 hours or 990 hours. So that is a big shift that just occurred, that was just passed.
Dr. Kelly, do you want to grab a sip of water or catch your breath
I'm
or something?
good, I'm good.
I mean, I'm
Dr.
emotional over
Garrett,
Ed too, but
He's taking
we're
this
trying
next
to,
one.
we got to get through this calendar still. So
Dr. McGarry is going to take this next piece.
Yeah, I think Christine's emotional because it's been a long time since she's had to go through an agenda item when it used to be a team doing this. So it brings back a lot of memories. She's probably nervous thinking, where's this going to go? She can't kick me. Back in the day when we did this together, if I did something she didn't like, she would just kick me under the chair. She can't kick me this far across the room. Yeah, I do think that the calendar conversation, where we were when I first became an assistant superintendent to where we are today, is even more cumbersome than it ever was before. So Christine doesn't give herself enough credit. But here we are today having a conversation that I think is one that's important. In 22-23, the development of that calendar, the board asked the administration to consider adding, for the first time, 2 religious observances on the calendar. There's a lot of discussion about that, a lot of conversation. And so at that time, there was a request to add Diwali and Eid to our calendar. Those days were added, and obviously we provide that support, and obviously those days change from calendar to calendar. Some days they fall on a weekend, some days they do not. Most recently, there's been a lot of conversations really around the work of our work of climate and culture, equity and diversity, belonging and inclusion in the district. Dr. Council and I have met with students on several occasions. We've also met with some staff members. Most recently, some staff members have questioned our work appropriately, questioning, what our stance is on the work of belonging and inclusion and diversity, where previously there were not religious observances on our calendar, then there were religious observances on our calendar, and why aren't all religious observances on our calendar? And so we took that as an opportunity to have a conversation with members of our teaching staff and other members of the team, just to process through, when you look at calendars that kind of like spell out religious observances, there would be a lot of days where school would be in question if we were to follow all religious observances on our calendar. So we processed through some different conversations to consider. One, go back to a calendar prior to the 22-23 school year where we had our typical breaks, Thanksgiving, winter, and spring, and some considered more historical days off from school, and spell out the religious observances on our calendar as an opportunity that they would be taught, explained, and students on our calendar would know what those religious observances meant, and for all religious observances to be spelled out on that calendar so that our kids and our community will be aware of what that is. Another conversation was one of where do we try to rotate religious observances to see how many times they would actually fall on a weekday versus a weekend, and see how that would work itself out. Instead of taking religious observances off, would we rotate those religious observances? And then obviously, if we were to add some religious observances, the most recent ones that I'll go through here in a minute that we've been asked to consider, what does the impact on the calendar have? Now, as those discussions were happening, Dr. Kelly is correct. Act 80 did not provide this flexibility that 180 school days don't matter. So I do want the board to take into consideration now, if you elect to go short of 180 school days, you would then have to agree that you're hitting at least 900 hours and 990 hours at the secondary level. So I don't need an answer not necessarily tonight, but I do want you to keep in mind, if you're not worried about extending the school year, and I'll go through that in a moment, recognize that you would be essentially saying we're already going to make a decision that the 180 days is not as much of a priority as the hours would be. And they're my words, not your words. You can formulate that back to me the way that you feel is best. So what do I mean by that? So there were a couple of examples. We met with our union leadership. They actually went out and communicated with their own organization, their own unions. We typically process through the calendar with our leadership groups to make sure that there are no surprise gotchas with our calendars. This calendar, as much as I would like to say that following tonight, you come out with some direction for us, and in January we vote on it, and that's the only calendar that sticks, inevitably somebody will come back and hear this conversation and say, well, what about this and what about that? Even sometimes board members have. So we'd like the calendar to be adopted sometime in January. There have been times when it's not fully adopted, even into February, making adjustments back and forth following the discussion that we would have tonight. Key important parts on a calendar are graduation, high school graduation. Since we have high school graduation located off campus at Temple University, we really have to make sure we lock that date in sooner than later per that contract to make sure that we can have graduation on the date that we put on our calendar. So that's an important thing to consider, the date for graduation. Middle school and elementary school students, sorry to those who might be tuning in tonight, can go to school longer than 180 days. Oftentimes we have a calendar that has 183 student days because of snow days or anything else. We would have some cushioning to keep us from falling short of the original Act 80 requirement of 180 days. Again, that's now much more of an opportunity for you to maneuver around that we hadn't previously had. So for the 24-25 district calendar, some considerations that we were asked and some considerations for you to think about. If we were to keep the current version of a calendar that we have, that would focus on the observances of Eid and Diwali going into next school year. You can see here how it would map out what that would look like, what days the last day of school would look like. And if we were to only keep those religious observances, we would not have to extend the school day at all. In that calendar, we would also keep Indigenous People, Columbus Day on the calendar. We would not have the 23rd of December off, which happens to be a Monday next year, only coming in for a Monday and then going on break. We kind of knew that our staff would be asking for that day. The gentleman that we're bringing back, Mr. Norelli, would typically have just given that. That's not how I operate. It's something we should really discuss as a conversation because, as a curriculum and instruction person at my core, kids being in school, learning, and having an education is still what we're in the business to do. Nonetheless, we process through a couple different opportunities. If we were to add the Jewish religious observances to the calendar, if we were to add one next year because it falls on a school day, the second religious observance that we were asked to consider is not on here for conversation because it does not fall on a student day. It falls on a weekend. So the request was for us to consider Rosh Hashanah, Diwali, the 23rd, and Eid. If we were to add all of these to our calendar, which was also asked of us by some of our union leadership, keep the October Indigenous People Columbus Day on the calendar, you would be extending the school day until June 16th. The school year, I'm sorry. Yep, the school year. I apologize. There you go. And you see you write that one down, so I couldn't feel it. So June 16th. The teachers union had gotten back to us, and in their surveying of their staff, they felt that going until June 13th, keeping the calendar of Diwali and Eid on the calendar and simply giving the 23rd off received the most number of votes from that group, meaning for next year's calendar, adding the Jewish observances was not surveyed by the entire faculty as something percentage-wise garnering enough of their support. I do want to say, and I have had this conversation with some board members in my team, it did come from some members of the organization for us to consider those religious observances in the calendar next year. there was the second place review on the calendar, receiving a little bit over 30% of the votes, was to add these days on the calendar and to go to the 16th of June. The number one being from the team, the 13th, the union, and then the second, garnering the second highest votes of options, would be to go to the 16th of June. And I want you to be aware of that conversation that we had with the group about how do we handle these religious observances. I think the one thing that we learned from this process, I think it's important, regardless of which religious observances we put on this calendar for this year, I think making sure that our calendar lists the religious observances as an educational opportunity for our community and our kids is something we were going to be doing moving forward as educational learning opportunities for the community. Whether we're off on that day or not, it is something I think that we should add through our work and our climate and culture here in the school district. I think it's important that we could all learn from one another about the process of observing religious events and holidays and why they're important. So that's the gist, Dr. Kelly. I don't know if I covered what I was supposed to there, but that's the gist for this slide for your consideration as a board to give us direction administratively what you would like us to consider.
So to continue with the the presentation, these are the key dates that I know as a mom, when I would get the school calendar, these are the ones that I list on my calendar right away. So teachers return for professional development days in August, so August 20th through the 23rd. The first day of school, regardless of whether the religious holidays are put back into the calendar or not, the first day would be Monday, August 26th for students K through 12. The professional development days would follow really what we've been doing for the last, I want to say, 6 years, where the 5th of November, which is Election Day, Friday, February 14th, which is a professional development day, which is close to President's Weekend. Tuesday, May 20th is our contract and service day, meaning the teachers fulfill those hours doing professional development at another time in an area that they feel will help their craft. And then Friday, May 23rd is May 20th is right now the primary election day. That's why I have the little star there, because it always changes. And then Friday, May 23rd is that contract and service day. I'm sorry. Currently, right now, the graduation would be Monday, June 9th. Early dismissal, or the last day of school for students grades K through 11, would be on the 10th, again, an early dismissal day, and the teachers would stay and check out and leave for the summer on Tuesday, June 10th. Additional days, which again have followed what we have been doing, there will be monthly early dismissal days. Those days are used for professional development, grading, and planning with our teachers. There are an exception in January for high school because of final exams. Their day comes a little bit differently during that time period or that month. And then April during state testing, because it's too much disruption during state testing. There are also 3 additional elementary days that align with the trimesters. Last year, I believe it was our first year that we put those into the calendar, and they fall in alignment with the end of the trimester in December, March, and June. We will continue to do fall conferences for grades 1 through 8 and kindergarten on that week before the Thanksgiving break, which is an adjusted schedule for parents. Thanksgiving break will fall after that, with that all-district early dismissal the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then the break would begin the 28th, which is Thanksgiving, and resume on the 2nd. Winter break would begin on December 24th of 2024, and then resume back on January 2nd of 2025. Spring break, again, would begin on the 14th, and then school would resume on the 21st. So those are the key dates, I think, that all parents kind of wait for to mark their calendar. The other piece are just the assessment dates. These are provided to us by PDE, and then we follow their guidelines and look at how it would play out on our school calendar. So January 6th through January 13th, which is a little bit better than coming back right from spring break or winter break and assessing. So it gives us a little bit of time, a few days, for that assessment window. April 22nd to May 1st is PSSAs for grades 3 through 8, and then we administer another Keystone exam for our students in those trigger classes, the second that are in the second semester, those trigger classes in May 12th through the May 19th. And again, that follows the window that PDE provides for state testing. So any emergency closing, when we look at this, we are looking at, of course, the state minimum. Again, when I did this presentation and uploaded it to Board Docs, the House bill did not change. So now, or the House bill was not in effect. So now that it is, that does need to be updated just a little bit. So it is now an or for us. The school district personnel will continue to follow our established communication protocols in the event of an emergency, weather or anything else that we would need to adjust the time or the schedule for. And then we also have the flexible instructional days that we still have an application through PDE that we can use. A flexible instructional day in the event of an emergency. We have up to 5 to use, and that application is still valid right now. We will be up in June to rewrite that as well and get it approved. So at this time, that's the end of this presentation. What kind of questions do we have?
Thank you. I do have one question, and I'm not sure whether it's I just missed it or whether it's not discussed yet. Currently, there was some concern about the half days on every Thursday in the middle schools. Is that being addressed in the calendar or just not here yet?
So the half days on every Thursday are part of the professional development of our teachers. So that was not part of this calendar as we looked at it. We can go back and say, is this something that we want to consider and keep? But at this point, our middle school teachers were finding it beneficial. We can come back and provide data and to show what they are doing on those days and to see what is working, if you would like that piece of information. But currently, they are still on this calendar as it is written.
I think, make sure I understood the question. The question was, are they on the calendar? And for this, they are in the calendar that's loaded for the board. They are on that conversation and for the public for the review for this initial draft calendar. But the Thursday middle school half days are on that calendar up for your review tonight.
As half days, they should count as school days, correct?
Yes. Again, the and or comes into play differently now, but in the past, regardless, also under Act 80, professional development days, while appropriately listed on the calendar, count those days and that time, 4 days and hours, according to the Act 80 law. But yes, coming into school that day counts as a day. Under the previous law, the and was also the hours, but on professional development days under Act 80 law, PD days count toward that time.
Just one comment, and I don't mean for this to be considered as part of the process of adopting next year's calendar, but Dr. McGarry was mentioning that a few different alternatives for recognizing religious days were discussed. And putting my policy hat on, I might be interested in seeing if it could be approached, if we have the information available to us, if we could say, if we had some idea of the, prevalence of various religions in our community, if we could do it by setting a threshold that would apply, at which a religious holiday would be granted, such that, or it might be we recognize the top 3 religions or something, so that there's some meaningful measure other than the community members from this particular religion raised their voices and asked us to add a religious observance. So I will ask that the policy group discuss this at an upcoming meeting.
Yeah, I'll just put my 2 cents in. I heard Dr. McGarry talk about the percentages and the preference of the teachers, and I was disappointed to hear that the one that came in second is the one that I would choose, where everybody gets to have their religion acknowledged and celebrated every year. And if we have to extend the school year, a couple of days to make sure everybody feels like they're properly recognized, that would be my vote. I can't imagine whatever I celebrate being in a rotation where we don't get to celebrate it this year and I got to wait till next year. I couldn't imagine how that would make me feel. So I know I won't get to vote on it, but I'm just expressing my thoughts on it. Yeah, that's it.
I think the concern is when you look at the religious observances in our community, to Board Member Desnoyer's point, we're looking at now over 90 different cultures and backgrounds represented. When you pull kind of a religious observance, I feel like I might back to you guys, I apologize, some kind of religious observance calendar that's there, depending on the type of religion that's around. And we joke around, I don't want to put my religion out there for the world to make it, there's a forum for that. But what I believe, we're off just about every other day for some religious observance. And the concern then becomes, I think, to Board Member Desnoyer, is this idea of percentages. Some on the committee thought there was an actual percentage that went down this path. There isn't much by way of that from PD for that guidance. I would be careful. Again, I think what President Brown was commenting on is this idea of honoring the folks that are there and being respectful of that. We do have members of the committee that were like, look, this is my background. What about this religious holiday? I preferred there not being on there because I know how difficult it was or how difficult it is. So it's a complicated conversation. I don't want the message to be that anybody was against or for one versus another. It was more about teachers are kind of creatures of habit. This is what they're used to. And then we also talked about in the past where days like Veterans Day were days off, or other days that were off that are actually good educational opportunities. Kids might want to be in school to learn about more of those from an educational standpoint. So it was a pretty robust conversation that we had. I don't want the message to be, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, I just feel obligated to say it for myself, that there was a picking of one versus the other. Quite frankly, teachers, even some of the religious teachers that asked for some of their holidays to be observed, admitted, heck, when it comes down to it, I think I vote for the 23rd of December too for that week, and in lieu of their own religious observance. Teachers, I think, see the planning and the holidays and where it is. I think it's more of a respect factor too, of acknowledging the religion, acknowledging what's going on as part of our grander work on equity and inclusion and belonging. But I do understand your point and perspective. I'm not necessarily I thought that the 23rd would be their number one pick. I'll leave it at that. I thought that if they were to come back and ask for a calendar adjustment, the 23rd above and beyond any of these would be something they would look. The May day that Dr. Kelly talked about, which is the contract and service, we talked about moving that as a day for one of these. And then the comment was, we let go into the shore that weekend, so we don't want to give up that day that way. So this is what these conversations become. Does that make sense? And so that's really where it gets down to. I don't want it to be about preferential treatment of one religion over another. I think if we can get to a place where we're respecting all and educating all, that's a really good next step. Previously, we didn't have religious observances on our calendar until 22, 23. And that's where it became, well, since you did that, why did you do that? What was the equity work behind making that decision? And they were good questions. And we want to make sure we come back to the table with good conversations about it.
To Neil's point, I think it's good to have like a standard or policy, because if it's like we're going to recognize religious holidays and maybe not cultural holidays, or not recognize it in the same way, that way we can explain, or we can help people understand how we make the distinction between one and the other. So if we're going to say, well, we're going to recognize whatever religious holidays and here's why, but we're not recognizing this holiday because it's not necessarily a religious holiday, it's a cultural holiday, then we need to be able to explain that why too, as well.
One thing I should mention, again, wearing my policy hat, is a fairly recent change to state law. that has been incorporated into our attendance policy that, do I have it correct, that any student may be excused for an observance under a bona fide religion, and I believe the requirement is that the district be notified in advance of when the student will be absent. Is that correct, or do I have that part
Yeah,
incorrect?
I'll simplify it to say this from my building principal hat from back in the day. Simply put, missing school for religious reasons is worked out by the principal. Giving advance is yes or no. We work it out typically with that family and that team that's the reason why they miss school, and it's an acceptable absence now. Previously, it really necessarily wasn't an acceptable absence. It has been in our policy for some time now as an acceptable absence from school for attendance reasons. It's an excused absence.
Thank you.
I guess comment maybe, but we polled the teachers and we got their opinion. Has any conversation happened with families?
So typically, I just want to be clear, the administration did not. The union has a tendency historically when this goes through that they have that opportunity to look at the calendar and provide feedback from a curriculum and instruction standpoint. Historically in the school district, this forum of the approval and the back and forth, the comments and the public engagement for this is typically the forum when we push out the agendas for this evening and we ask for comments and feedback. This is typically the forum for our committee meetings. When we have these meetings, we push out a communication, hear the agenda items, provide your feedback. So this is typically the forum that we would get that feedback. We have received feedback from students and supervisory groups with the superintendent, but to your grander question, we haven't typically put a survey out on just this topic, no.
This is the kind of thing that would go out, and that we do have that communication letter that Ms. Buford and Director Mitchell and now Director Glenn will be working on. So this will be that kind of thing that was included in that. So the people get it gets pushed out there. Does it get consumed? Different question, right? Different goal, but it does get pushed out there.
President Fields, I just want to read from the code. It does, since I found it, it says a student's absent in the Pennsylvania Code, a student's absence from school for religious holidays or for religious instruction shall be recorded as an excused absence. A penalty may not be attached to an absence for religious holidays or instruction. The word bona fide is not in there. I mean, how would they define that? So.
In our policy 204, in the authorities section, it states the board considers the following conditions to constitute reasonable cause for absence from school or an excused absence. Number 8 is observance of a religious holiday observed by a bona fide religious group upon prior written request from the person in parental relation. And so our solicitor may correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the term bona fide religion can be interpreted or is actually meant as a religion that is recognized by the IRS.
So bona fide actually is in, I'm sorry, bona fide actually is in the statute, right now it's speaking well, where it defines what a school year is, and it does specifically exempt from there the applicable to the school district as further defined in section 13.7 for a school which is, and then they start using the bona fide church, bona fide religion. So it is in the school code. It's just not in that section. It's defining other terms.
Thank you both. As an aside, but adding to this conversation, I know in the UK, one of their censuses, one of the last censuses they did a number of years ago, enough people put Jedi as their religion that is now recognized as a religion in the UK. So, yeah, as it should be. But these are, the goal here is recognition and appreciation and inclusion. None of what we're doing, the intent behind what we're doing is never exclusion, right? And that's what we're trying to get to. It's unfortunate, but one of the things that happens when you try to recognize and make people happy is that other people are unhappy. But our goal here is just to get it right, and sometimes it takes trying and making an effort a few times to get it right, and that's all we're doing here. I'd remiss if I weren't to say one of the largest growing groups are people that are a-religious, right? And whether they consider themselves spiritual or secular or what that is, but it's also its own group, and I'm just recognizing that since we're here recognizing things. Does anybody else have a question or comment on this topic? Okay, and anything else from the administration on this? You're okay there, Ms. Kelly? Good, and you're okay. And this is where I ask for any comments from the public in the room. No, and I'm going to ask for, and I suspect it's none, but any comments online?
There are no comments online.
Thank you, Ms. Buford. All right, and then I will ask Ms. Kelly, Dr. Kelly, will you review the agenda items presented this evening?
Absolutely. So the first item on the agenda was the Keystone exams, which was an informational item. And then the second item is the 24-25 one-page calendar, which would require board action to move forward for a vote. But we would need guidance on how you would like us to proceed with that.
Okay, thank you. Is there a will from the board to move the district calendar as it is forward?
Yes.
Yes? Or maybe you don't know. So since it's we got a number of new members on the board and not enough of our former members tonight, by saying I want to move this forward, you're saying I would like to vote on this in the next meeting, right? You may have some changes, right? And in voting, and the solicitor will correct me if I'm wrong, in voting, you could say that now. You could say, I'd like to move it forward, but this, or but not this, or I want this. Or you could say, I'm not comfortable moving it forward. We may get to the next, you can say, I want to move it to the voting meeting, but there's some changes I want to see to vote on it. Any more clarification we can provide there, Kyle?
Sure. The seeking to move it out of committee is just that. It's a decision that the full board should consider this for purposes of making the vote. It doesn't mean necessarily it's going to look quite the same going forward, but it is something that you want the board to be able to consider and vote on.
And despite what changes we want to make, we do have to vote on a calendar. So that could be reason enough to move it out of committee. There still might be some changes. We're not taking away the ability to do that. But here's where we decide whether or not we want to move it out of committee. I have a yes from Ed, a yes from Director Znoyers. I'll come back to you. Yes. I am a yes. No pressure, new guys.
Yes. I'm just a little confused.
That's fine.
So if we move it out of committee, we vote, you're saying we would possibly vote on it the next meeting?
We will vote on the next meeting, but we can still make changes.
So the way that you move it out of committee so that it can go for discussion and vote at the next meeting. It doesn't mean, first of all, it doesn't mean it's going to pass at the next meeting. Second of all, it doesn't mean that the calendar or whatever it is that you're moving out of committee is necessarily going to be voted on in the form that it is now. So you might, at the next meeting, decide that you're going to make further changes. I'm not sure how expansive those changes should be, because the reality is also the opportunity to discuss it at length is available here. And if you want to discuss it, or there's things that you want to discuss about it, you could have those discussions here before you move it out of committee as well.
All right, I'm going to allow Dr. McGarry to provide some additional clarity.
And maybe this was your point to this too. And I'll since it was my slide, I'll take some responsibility for it. what I would prefer us to consider, the actual calendar that's loaded in there tonight for you is void of any religious observances. So the calendar we're living in right now today has Eid and Diwali listed as the religious observances. For purposes this evening, we were asking through that process if you would like us to keep those on the calendar or not, or add others as well and change that date from the date that's in front of you to the dates that are listed on slide number 4. So maybe it would be good if
Yeah, let's go. I'm going to ask this question again then. I appreciate that clarification. So now I'm going to try it again. Would you like, and I'm going to go to each board member. I'm going to start with you, Neil. Would you like to include the dates that are in the presentation in the calendar that's going forward? And you can put whatever caveats and changes on that you want. You're saying yes.
I will say yes. I would like the additional dates included. Yes, I would like the additional dates included.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let me go here. Director Murphy Morrissey, would you like to move the calendar forward with the dates that have been proposed, including the dates that are proposed in the presentation?
The dates for option 1 or option 2?
The dates for option 1 or option 2?
The teacher,
Right. The
surveys.
teachers are saying they want the 23rd over December 23rd over October 3rd. Is that what did you say that? Is
Yeah,
that what
so-
you're asking?
Yes, so this is what I need in order to make an educated vote. To see a calendar with the dates for both options, and also to see a calendar with the half days so I can see what we're voting for.
The half-day calendar is provided to the board, has been provided to the board. It's in board docs right now.
Okay.
So all the half-days are there for the board, and they're discussed in this, and they're in the summary of that. What's not on the calendar that's in front of the board tonight, and we were looking for some direction, is simply put, keep Eid and Diwali as we always have, update the calendar to provide the 23rd off or not, and or add any of the Jewish observances that are listed on here. If that's not the case, we would keep the calendars in front of you that does not have any of the religious observances. We need your feedback. Then we could come back to you at the next meeting with 1 or 2 of those calendars if you want us to, if that's the feedback. What would the dates look like with those calendars there? Or, hey, we want you to add these religious observances, and knowing that the calendar is going to come back with the 16th as the end date of the school year.
And that's my option. That's what I would vote
Okay.
for. To add Rosh Hashanah.
So maybe we simplify this and say the calendar that has the end date of the 16th, you understand that adds those religious observances,
Yes.
or the date that's the 13th does not add all of the observances.
It doesn't add it doesn't add Rosh Hashanah.
It adds Rosh Hashanah, it does not add the 23rd.
It does not add the 23rd. Okay, thank you. Okay, so is this 13th or the 16th? I have a vote for the 16th.
Yes.
Giving you time. Back over here. I'm going to go back to you, Neil. This 13th or the 16th? You're voted for the 13th. Okay. Kimberly,
For the 16th.
the 16th? Mayor-elect Brown, 16th?
I just think we need a little bit more time.
Okay, that's an abstain. I'll say the 16th. Okay.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is we'll update a calendar, and by the next meeting, there'll be more conversations. It doesn't mean that this calendar gets approved, but we'll have to update the calendar, adding these dates that were discussed on slide 4, and make those adjustments with an updated calendar. We'll also keep for the board the current calendar that you have, and we can also, if it makes it easier for you, update one with the 13th.
And we'll have one less board member, but 2 more. So more voices in the room at the time. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Are we good over there, Dr. Kelly?
Yep, all good.
We're all good? No, I think the other one was informational, right?
Yes, the other one was information.
Okay, fantastic. All right, do the public comment. Before I adjourn, 6 years ago, my friend Ed, you said, Don, I know you want to do this township thing. I was I was suffering through a tough loss. It was 10 votes, and it was just a real stinker. And you said, I know you want to do that township thing down, and I know you're doing some stuff that involves the township, but we're doing good work over here, and I'd really like to have you over here. So thank you for that invite, Ed. Thank you very much, because now you are where you are, and I am where I am, and I think that worked out all right. So thanks again.
And the board couldn't be in better hands. I'm happy to turn over the leadership of this board to you. So good work.
Thank you so much. A motion is in order, and I'm only going to point to one person. A motion is in order for the adjournment of the Education and Pupil Services meeting.
So moved.
Second.
This meeting is adjourned.